Joining me now, two former governors, former governor and senator for the state of Nebraska, Bob Kerrey, a Democrat, and the former governor of Minnesota, Tim Pawlenty. Senator Kerrey, good to see you as always. So this goes way beyond just this one woman's tale of woe. This has been a real rocky rollout for the president's signature law. What, if anything, can he do to turn it around?
Well, I don't think he should even try to turn it around. He should just try to implement the legislation and stay open to the possibility there's some provisions of that law that need to change. It's a very complicated bill. I actually ended up having to read it because I ran for Senate unsuccessfully in 2012, and it's complicated. And you need to stay open to the possibility there's provisions of that law that need to change. And on this particular case, however, what you got is a woman who was uninsured for 15 years. She was able to get insurance, but it cost too much. That's not uncommon in the individual marketplace. And among the provisions that apparently the president was unaware of is the law required minimum standards in order for insurers to provide in this individual marketplace. If you didn't meet it, you had to cancel the policy. That's a much bigger problem, failing to notice that particular issue, because now they should have actually changed that provision prior to these insurance companies canceling it.
You don't think they should have the minimum standards?
Well, you can't have a minimum standard if you want to make certain that nobody has a policy change, because the minimum standards forces a policy change. So if you don't want people to have to change their policy, you can't have a minimum standard because it's self-defeating. So yeah, all I'm saying is, particularly in this environment, where the Republicans almost unanimously want to repeal, that's their whole mantra, let's get rid of the darn thing, you've got to look for opportunities where you say, look, I think this is a reasonable change, let's make this change, and just try to make it better, because it's a extremely complicated law.
Governor Pawlenty, we've talked in the past about the Republican obligation to come up with alternatives, to show leadership, to not just be against everything. Let's posit right now that that's your position. Where is the Republican leadership on these issues? I see a lot of attempts to undermine the law. The Upton bill, I think everybody can agree, went farther than people were talking about the need for it to be tweaked. Do you think the Republican Party, the Republican leadership, is doing what it needs to do to put the country back on the right track?
Well, I think if you're going to be a responsible governing leading party, you have to not only just criticize the other side, but offer your own ideas and solutions. So I think you'll see Republicans increasingly doing that. But right now, of course, as the Obamacare infrastructure is struggling and some would say imploding, they don't want to jump into the middle of that because they think that gives them some advantage. But if you look at things, Jake, like, look, we need medical malpractice reform. In a world where I can get on the internet tonight and buy anything anywhere across the world through the internet, why can't I buy my health insurance across state lines? Do we really need that parochial? Open up the market, make it more competitive. We should look at, requiring providers to have easier, better, more consumer-friendly disclosures around what stuff costs. If you go to the doctor now, depending on what health insurance you have and what reimbursement system you're under, there could be 10, 15 different prices for the same procedures. Very difficult to find out, very difficult to have a market under those circumstances. So those are just some examples. But the answer to your question is yes.
I want to broaden this conversation to the economy as well. Earlier today, President Obama met with business leaders at the Wall Street Journal's CEO Council, and he said this.
I want you to know that I'm rooting for your success.
Are business leaders rooting for the president's success, Governor Pawlenty?
Well, I think all Americans want to see their president succeed. But clearly, when a leader has a challenge of this magnitude and of this nature on a signature issue, I think stepping back and saying, okay, maybe this is a time where we should reach across the aisle and do the kinds of fixes that Senator Kerrey just mentioned in his comment. But, there's a lot of business leaders who would say this is a president who has done a nice job reaching out to them in many instances, but hasn't done as good a job, meeting in the middle as opposed to ramming through something that was more, partisan.
Senator, you live in New York, and I'm sure you're well acquainted with the fancy CEO types that we're talking about. Are they rooting for President Obama to succeed?
Well, I don't really know whether they're rooting for him to succeed. They've got issues that they want to get addressed. And I would say there are many issues where they're very frustrated because Congress isn't addressing. I mean, right now in New York especially, there's a considerable amount of frustration over immigration. The House won't take it up. They absolutely won't take the bill. It's passed the Senate and they won't take it up. It's long overdue. There's frustration on tax reform. There's a lot of enthusiasm to try to simplify the tax code, but there doesn't seem to be much movement. There seems to be an awful lot of sort of role-playing going on in Washington right now, but not a lot of things getting done. So I think there's more frustration on the lack of progress on fiscal issues. They were appalled that the leadership of the Republican Party is willing to put the country in default. willing to shut the government down for 16 days. They don't like that. And I don't think actually the Republican leadership at this point likes that either. So there was a lot of hope coming out of that, that possibly the Republican Democrats in Washington would find themselves in disagreement on some things, but able to agree on and reach compromise.
And you don't think it's going to happen?
Well, I don't. You know, I actually think that one of the problems with the implosion of the Affordable Health Care Act, particularly the exchange, the federal exchange, but also now this issue with people being thrown off of their policies, I think it's actually given some new hope to Republican leadership that maybe they can get back on the attack. And you have to look for these opportunities when they come to act genuinely rather than just saying we're going to cross party lines. And Tim's got some very good ideas. And if it was a part of a Republican presentation to say, we're not going to try to repeal this thing. Here's 3 things we want, Mr. President, you to put in there. Let's change this thing and try to make it work for the American people. I think
dare I suggest the Kerry-Pawlenty Commission? A blue ribbon panel? A blue ribbon panel?
I don't have any blue ribbons left.
All right.
No.
Senator Kerry, Governor Pawlenty, thank you so much.